I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. Code Vein released in 2019, and to be honest, I wasn't interested. Tons of fan service, but only for the women, a plot that from the outside looked overly edgy, and a combat flow that felt very different to what I was used to at the time. I let it pass me by, and I regret that heavily now, because in the year 2026, I have been voted for by you guys to play 12 Souls-likes, and Code Vein was number 8. And having purchased it during the January PlayStation sale alongside its DLC, I can safely say that Code Vein was not at all what I was expecting. I thought we were getting edgy anime Souls, but what I got was a game that felt mostly inspired by Dark Souls 2 of all things. For the purposes of this video, combat is the focus, and like Dark Souls 2, I love how punishing combat can be if you make the wrong choices. Heal at a bad time and the boss will punish you due to the very slow healing animation. Get too greedy and you'll be knocked down by attacks you could otherwise dodge or avoid. There are various debuffs that can spell doom if you're not careful in the early game, and yet by the end of the adventure, you do feel powerful, able to take on just about anything and anyone the game can throw at you. And same goes for the bosses. Code Vein does not pull its punches, and I can't wait to talk about it. So, be sure to parry that subscribe button if you like Code Vein, and if this video gets to 500 likes, I will also add Code Vein 2 to my Souls-likes I play this year. That one's up to you guys. Let's jump right in, ranking the Code Vein bosses from worst to best. And hey, if this video does well enough, maybe I'll do an area ranking, ooh! Let me know if that's something you want to see down below. At number 20, we have the Attendant of the Relics, fought near the end of the Provisional Government Center. This fight isn't meant to be difficult, more of a roadblock, one that is meant to have emotional weight due to your main companion Io also being an attendant. We're killing one of her sisters. The attendants are tasked with watching over characters in the game called successors, people who watch over a series of holy yet dangerous relics. They're not fighters, even if they are capable of combat, and they are single-minded in their purpose. But I wish this boss had a bit of dialogue to emphasize this. By having her silently attack you with no cutscene involved, it just feels a tad random, like, oh no, this white-haired girl is really angry, let's kill her. The energy that the developers were going for just didn't really land with this fight for me, which isn't helped by the fact that you absolutely wombo combo stunlock the poor girl with every attack. I'll likely forget this fight even exists in a few weeks, and that's probably the most damning evidence of all. At number 19, we have Oliver Collins, the first boss of the game, who wins the award for funniest boss name in a Souls-like. Oliver is a character who accompanies you for a portion of the tutorial before his gas mask is shattered in an attack. In Code Vein, there is a miasma that, if breathed in by the regular revenants, that's the main characters of the game, it will corrupt and turn them into the Lost, which are the main enemies of the game. Oliver suffers this fate, going into a frenzy when we encounter him, and it's up to us to take him and his big weapon down. Most of my struggle from this fight came from it just being the first boss, and thus I wasn't comfortable with Code Vein's combat flow. I felt like I wasn't doing enough damage, I kept getting hit by his attacks, and halfway through the fight, Oliver experiences twink death and becomes a large demonic enemy with even slower tells, but who hits harder as a result. Part of my struggle was that Code Vein is a game designed around a companion system, where you can summon companion characters who accompany you through areas and boss fights. You can go solo, and for most of the game, I did, but everything is clearly designed with these companion characters in mind, hence why I wasn't doing a lot of damage to Oliver. They wanted me to bring Louis so he could split the aggro and help me deal more damage. I didn't do that, so while Oliver killed me more than he should have, it did help me to understand the game a bit better. Still, Oliver's human form isn't that interesting to fight, and the lost form he turns into becomes a regular enemy in the game. Not that special, Collins. At number 18, we have the Argent Wolf Berserker, fought midway through the Cathedral of Sacred Blood. And the award for most annoying boss runback in the game goes to you. You have to rush past a series of powerful knights who can teleport after you if you try to run around them, and who will decimate your health bar long before you reach the boss. Just buy camouflages from Coco in the hub, it goes a long way. As for the boss itself, the Berserker is technically quite easy. He is susceptible to both parries and backstabs, meaning if you know your positioning, you can just chain backstabs to absolutely cheese this fight. His attacks are slow and lumbering, but hit extremely hard if you mess up the dodge or block timings. You can't back away from the boss though, because he'll just summon a blood AoE that covers half the arena that is fucking bullshit. And also, the size of the arena itself is like a matchbox, which makes dealing with this boss extra tough to manage. I was already quite exhausted by just how long the cathedral area was, and then getting stuck for over an hour on this boss because the runback plus the high damage output was enough to have me questioning whether I actually liked the game. Luckily, the answer to that is yes, but this battle brings the pacing of the area to a screeching halt, and I genuinely feel it could have been cut from the game, and nothing of value would be lost. And then you still have 1/3 of the fucking area to go afterwards. What the fuck? At number 17, we have the Insatiable Despot, fought in the Dried Up Trenches. This is one of those bosses where there isn't anything inherently wrong with the fight, but it just isn't that exciting in comparison to the rest of the roster. But he has a sick-ass design. I love the helmet face. The Despot in his first half will attempt to stab you with red crystals from the ground. They jut upwards, then remain for a short while before spawning a minion. However, you have more than enough time to destroy the crystals he spawns, so this was never a problem for me. Beyond that, the Despot will use his daggers to slash at the ground in front of him, and all you have to do is the tried and true Soulsborne formula of sticking to and smacking that booty. He can't hit you from behind with any of his attacks, which means it's a perfect blind spot. At half health, the Despot will buff himself. This is something that most bosses in Code Vein do. They become practically invulnerable when they buff, which allows you time to heal or apply your own buffs in the meantime. The boss then summons a giant spear, and his melee combos become stronger. He gains a double spin attack that kicked my ass every time I had to dodge it. There's just not enough iframes for you to reliably dodge inwards, so you gotta teach yourself to go outwards to not get clipped. This is useful information, by the way, as a majority of the bosses in this game do come with a spin to win attack. He also gains a homing spell where he fires a blood torrent along the floor that tries to hit the player. You can roll around it to have it go past you though. Aside from that, it's the same fight as before. Dodge into the ass, be careful of the spin, and get your hits in to come out on top. This should have been the second boss of the game, as in order to get here, you have to fight the Butterfly of Delirium, who is so much harder in every single way. Code Vein devs, you're a bit crazy, I've gotta say. At number 16, we have the Virgin Born, the final boss of Code Vein, fought in the Jail of Stagnant Blood. All of the holy relics come together, fusing to create this abomination that we have to kill to save the world. And yet, it ends up being one of the worst final bosses I have experienced in a Souls-like. There is no extravagance or excitement in this moveset. The most deadly part of the Virgin Born's arsenal are a series of fairly slow, just delayed enough claw swipes that will rock your world and do insane amounts of damage. Wow. The boss also has two different jump attacks that land with dithering speeds and will damage you badly if hit. It has an AoE that forces you to run away lest you get one shot, and to cap it off, the boss only takes good damage from the head, so you can't just hide underneath and smack the booty. Oh, and the one magic attack in the first half of the fight looks incredibly janky. Is it just me, or are the crystals coming out of the boss's mouth not even centered correctly? At half health, the boss gains a crazy magic ability to summon a lightning storm that rains down on the arena. I can't say I figured out how to avoid this attack, I just chose to tank it because the boss then has a lengthy rest period where it just sits there right after. Basically, if you can get the Virgin Born to phase 2 with a decent amount of healing left, you can just DPS race your way to victory by baiting out the boss's ultimate move and punishing afterwards. Which is fine, it's not a bad design for a boss fight, but it is a bad design for a final boss fight. This creature never shows off enough power to where I think, ah yeah, this is a final boss. I had to do the DLC fights to get that experience, and those guys aren't even from Code Vein in the first place, they're reskins from the studio's previous series, God Eater. At number 15, hot take alert, we have the Queen's Knight Reborn, fought in the Provisional Government Outskirts. This is a rematch with the Queen's Knight, who was fought much earlier in the game, except unlike most rematch fights, I don't feel like this one earned its keep. There's no real cutscene to reintroduce this boss. Many of its attacks have the exact same weakness as the original fight, which is that you can simply dodge inwards and around the boss to avoid most of his weapon combos, and his teleportation ability he gains midway through the fight, while more hectic than its original incarnation, isn't anything new by this point in the game. We've faced so many enemies that can do this and more that it just isn't threatening. His most dangerous ability is a green aura he can create around himself for a short period of time. If you step within range, it builds up the leak status effect, which, if you're afflicted, will slowly deplete all of your Ichor. Ichor is the fuel that allows you to use your special abilities like your buffs, debuffs, and weapon arts. But if you're like me, you have a fully upgraded weapon and Blood Veil, you can just say fuck that and keep attacking the Queen's Knight Reborn while he's applying that buff in the first place. What's Elite going to do when I'm already hitting for great damage with my regular swings, and I can just use that remaining Ichor to do a ton of burst damage? I just don't see why this boss needed to come back. It was incredibly cool in its first appearance with a really unique cutscene introduction, and it's a fight that bookends a really awesome moment in Code Vein, only for this rematch to just be at the end of a fairly bland area, no cutscene, not enough difference between the fights to justify being reborn. It may technically be a better battle than some of the bosses coming up on the list, but I think it's a letdown on every front. At number 14, we have the successor of the Ribcage, fought at the end of the Cathedral of Sacred Blood. This dog deity is the main mage fight of Code Vein, with Mrs. Ribcage being able to use a variety of elemental attacks to try and stave you off. She has fire beams, she has icicle crashes, she can plant bloody landmines that explode beneath your feet, and most dangerously, she has some brutal electricity moves that will leave you in pain. She starts on one side of the arena, then warps to the other side in a fiery explosion after you deal enough damage. The aim here is to get in, DPS burst her, get out, and already anticipate the spot she'll reappear in. You can use the pillars in the arena to avoid some of her magic, which I appreciate, and once she goes down, the fight is over, right? Nah, phase 2, baby! Successors in the lore are creatures that can constantly revive themselves. This doesn't have much effect on gameplay, but it does mean that for Mrs. Ribcage, you have to beat her twice. What I love is that if you die to her second phase, where all of her attacks are stronger and she gets a Demon Prince fire laser, you actually get to restart the fight on that second phase. You never have to do the first half ever again. Most of her attacks are fairly manageable, and sticking to her back is a great way to avoid a lot of her melee combos, especially that hand-to-hand electricity swipe that decimated my health bar when I played, and her ranged lightning strikes that cause spots around the player to be struck down caught me in stagger loops more often than I care to admit. But this was also the fight where I learned that chaining together your offensive gift attacks and planning your buffs accordingly can really turn the tide of the battle. I died a lot, but by the end of the fight, I really understood what Code Vein wanted from me. A fun battle. Mrs. Ribcage was surprisingly entertaining. Not a fight I'm clamoring to do again, mind you, but one I wouldn't mind refighting if I was told to. At number 13, we have the successor of the Claw, found in the City of Falling Flame. This boss remains special to me as the very first fight in Code Vein that I beat on my first attempt. This gas mask wearing catgirl has the speed and danger to knock you flat on your back, but the area prior to this, the Ashen Depths, sees you getting a blood code that unlocks a fire shielding gift. So this entire area, I was mitigating fire damage like an absolute beast. It made the zone far more manageable, and since it lasts a whole 60 seconds, I could top it up during the boss fight without worrying too much. She has a few melee combos in the first half, often accompanied by extra fire damage from her claws, and her tails can sweep around in a fiery swish if you're too close. But most of the time, Mrs. Claw just shot at me with a very easy to avoid ranged fire spell. She shoots 3 bolts of flame that you can just roll through, getting a good punish moments after. Her difficulty only comes in midway, when she reaches her second phase. Now, she can fire out a series of flame shards that embed in the ground and explode a short moment later. She has a lunge attack to make up distance, Or she can use a big fiery explosion to teleport above you and slam down her blade, Elder Prince Lorien style. But overall, her aggression is significantly neutered compared to some of the fights we've faced, that she just doesn't have enough time to do anything. Perhaps my flame shield helped as I took less damage overall, however, that's just playing the game. I wish she had more of an explosive fiery attack, or have her triple firebolt spell evolve in the second half to be more deadly. She's meant to be the fire boss of the game, and yet there's one later that upstages her heavily, and that's what keeps her at number 13. At number 12, we have the Butterfly of Delirium, fought in the Ruined City Center. This could potentially be people's second boss of the game, and is definitely intended as such, which is one of the cruelest jokes the developers could pull on the player. Why would you do this? Because the Butterfly of Delirium is a poison-based boss fight, where every attack applies the venom debuff, and if it hits, you are absolutely toast, and it will hit a lot, because the Butterfly has a wide moveset that will, without fail, manage to hit you. This can be mitigated, however, if you speak to Coco, the shopkeeper in this game's hub. She'll give you access to her blood code, which contains a gift allowing you to cure venom. This is practically a requirement for this boss fight, and you shouldn't attempt it without. The Butterfly has a host of varying melee attacks, a combo where it swipes right and then left, a combo where it bites forwards and does a spin attack, a charge where it launches to the other side of the arena while spewing poison, an AoE that releases a poison cloud, and a spit that shoots poison globs at you. It's a lot to keep track of, and that's just phase 1. Once the boss reaches around 60% health, it enrages and gains 2 very annoying poison-based attacks. The first is a poison spew, where it launches a large wide fog that moves along the arena. You have to either run away or around it, because going through it will decimate your HP. Its other attack is a homing poison missile, because again, Code Vein loves homing attacks. You can destroy it with a projectile ability, but the real challenge is in keeping track of the poison while also dealing with the Butterfly's regular moveset. There's so much to pay attention to here that I actually had to take a break from this boss, go and complete the entirety of the Howling Pit area, and then come back when I was more leveled up. I like this fight, I just think it's a very cruel placement, and if I could swap the Butterfly with the Insatiable Despot from a few entries ago, it would serve this game's pacing tremendously in the early game. At number 11, we have Juzo Mido, the main antagonist of Code Vein, fought atop the Crypt Spire. His goal is to free the Revenants from the land they've been trapped in via the Red Mists, only he knows the truth, that the outside world is also ravaged by horrifying beasts, and he wishes for Revenants to evolve by placing them in greater danger. He sacrifices lives for his own goals, and his actions directly lead to the events of the endgame. It's funny though, he is the antagonist, but we fight him a whole 2 areas before we finish, and yet by god he hits like a goddamn truck. The sword he wields is empowered by blood, and his combo game, while predictable to an extent, hits hard enough that it doesn't matter. He balances his own aggressive attacks with a series of blood magic, he can conjure an orb that follows the player, he can fire a blood bullet that can curve to follow the player, and he can do an energy crossbeam attack with his weapon that fires outwards, but doesn't follow the player. All of this is tough. I had defense buffs and attack buffs up the wazoo, and he was still 3-shotting me, 2-shotting me, and even 1-shotting me on occasion. Especially in phase 2, where all of his attacks become more powerful than before, and he has 2 more skills to trip you up. The first are a series of 4 blood orbs that rotate around the player. At 2 different intervals, 2 of the orbs will flash red and then explode, and you have to time your dodge to avoid the blast while also dealing with Mido's attacks. The second ability he has is a massive bloody charge that leaves a trail that explodes soon after. This is what will rip apart your health if you don't dodge right, and was a real run-ender for me on multiple counts. I actually quite like Juzo Mido. I think his moveset is pretty standard but fun. The only issue I have that really brings the fight down is that he just does so much damage, even with buffs and me being the correct level for the fight. Healing is just so difficult in this fight as he doesn't give you many opportunities, and many of my deaths can be chalked up to just failing to heal. Maybe I'd rank this one higher on a replay? I'm not sure, but 11th sounds about right for now. At number 10, we have the Frozen Empress, one of the 3 DLC bosses. Now, the DLC fights are going to be judged on a slightly different metric, as their difficulty is much higher than that of the base game. I'm almost certain you're supposed to do them on New Game Plus, or even New Game Plus Plus, as the difference in difficulty is meant to be negligible. I normally don't do New Game Plus on most Souls games. I'm there for that initial playthrough, and I'll only go the extra mile if I want the Platinum Trophy. Because these bosses were so much tougher than I anticipated, I decided to use a companion, my attendant, Io. Reason being, she's a mage, and each of the 3 DLC bosses is based on a different element which is weak to another. Fire against ice, ice against electric, electric against fire. Of the 3 fights, the Frozen Empress was the least interesting to me. We downed her in one go, but what I saw of her moveset was challenging, somewhat fun, but not really my cup of tea. Her main gimmick are these 2 crystals that float alongside her. Throughout the fight, they have the ability to buff the boss, and those buffs will upgrade as it progresses. The red crystal provides defense and damage buffs, with its final level creating a blizzard around the boss. The blue crystal causes ice pillars to appear around the map, which become frequently more deadly with projectiles and explosions as they upgrade. If you knock a crystal down by reducing its HP though, the upgrades and buffs will vanish. That doesn't mean you're out of the woods though, as the boss herself will be attacking you with melee strikes, ice blasts, and the like. One of the most annoying attacks for me would be when she'd summon these little ice cubes that appear all around you and begin sliding in your direction, so you'd have to dodge out of their firing line, which lasts quite a while. On your own, this fight must be a nightmare because you have to constantly micromanage the crystals. The boss itself doesn't have the craziest moveset around, but the health pool can turn the fight into a war of attrition, and that's just not really for me. Love the design though. At number 9, we have the successor of the Throat, fought in the Crown of the Sands. And wouldn't you know, this boss's main method of attack is to conjure giant sand hands to slap you silly, and I think we would deserve it. Now I will say, before we get to the boss, why is this run back so slow? You don't face any tough enemies, but you have to wait for an elevator, you have to run along a cliff, through a cave, and then up a massive cinematic path that is only cool the first time. Anything after that and you're just like, can we get back to the arena, please? There's only one thing worse than a run back with painful enemies, and that is a run back with literally nothing going on except length. Now, onto the fight. Mrs. Throat, like many of the late game bosses, inflicts the leak status effect with all of her attacks, which, if you recall, stops you from using all of your abilities. This can be dire, but luckily this sandwich's moveset is actually pretty fair. She's got this massive spinning attack that at first you think, oh, I should dodge away, but you can actually dodge right underneath her, and as long as you're hugging her while she moves, you won't take any damage. Her regular sand swipes are easy to deal with. She can also cause some sandstorms midway through the battle, but it's quite easy to stay out of their AoE range. The toughest move for me is actually when she sends 2 hands beneath the ground to chase you down. They'll pop back up 3 times, and while the timing is pretty simple, it can be hectic when she combos this with other moves and you lose a bit of focus. Suddenly you're knocked on your ass and leaking. Not a pleasant experience. Overall, her moveset is actually quite tame for this late in the game, and I'm not complaining, because I actually don't mind these, especially as from this point on, the boss difficulty ramps up significantly. But I think having 1 or 2 extra sand attacks in Phase 2 could have gone a long way to diversifying her moveset, and also having a checkpoint that's closer to the boss arena, thanks. At number 8, we have the Cannoneer and Blade Bearer, the first bosses of the Crypt Spire, who are fought together in gank fight fashion. This entry also requires some housekeeping, as this is very clearly a fight designed with the companion character mechanic in mind. When fighting with a friend, you each can take the aggro of one of the bosses, with them systematically switching between you as the fight progresses. It's still going to be hard, because, spoilers, this is the hardest fight in the base game, but it is doable. On your own solo, which is how I did the fight, it took me 20 attempts and 45 minutes, which apparently is quite good compared to some of the horror stories I've seen. But most of my attempts at this fight had me dying in the first 10 to 30 seconds. Let me explain. The Cannoneer is a fire-based ranged attacker, while the Blade Bearer is an ice-based melee attacker. You can't really split aggro between them in solo, as you really need to burst one of them down as quickly as you can. For me, it had to be the Blade Bearer. She was constantly on my ass with her 3-hit icy combo, or a lunge that is a really weird hitbox that can hit through the pillars on the map, so on and so forth. My strategy was just apply venom to my weapon at the start of the fight, and try to find as many openings to apply that debuff to her. Most of the time I'd fail, but when I succeeded, I'd often be able to get a stagger and thus bring her down a notch. The problem though is the Cannoneer, who if you're too close, will flamethrower stagger you to death, and if you're too far, he'll just summon a fire mine underneath you that explodes no matter where you are in the arena. You can't hide from him, which is honestly bullshit. Why have the pillars in this fight if he's just gonna hit you from everywhere anyway? This fight was pure luck for me. I had to get lucky with the moves I dodged, lucky with how aggressive Blade Bearer was being, lucky that Cannoneer wasn't anywhere near me, and once she went down, the fight became so simple. This guy on his own, nothing. Blade Bearer is the difficulty, alongside Cannoneer's landmine AoE and support. I can't say solo this fight is well designed, but I also have to take into account I was playing most boss fights in a way the game doesn't intend, and taking companions into account, as well as rematching this fight in the depths where it was much easier, I can see some quality here. No matter what, this gank is the most memorable fight in the game. For a lot of the wrong reasons, yes, but I still think they deserve a mention up here on the list for really giving me a hard time in the endgame. At number 7, we have the Lord of Thunder, the final DLC boss who, you guessed it, focuses on electricity as his element. The first part of the fight is pretty standard. He's a beast-type enemy who likes his bites and claw swipes, nothing too fancy just yet. Then he starts attacking with his wings, which have a massive reach and electricity tinged within them, which killed me on my first attempt. I was completely caught off guard, but those attacks were well telegraphed and I could see a way through on my next go-around. Many of his attacks ended up forward-facing, including a lot of his electricity, so if you were able to hug the booty, you could avoid a vast majority of his early moveset. I wasn't a fan of the move where he runs around the arena before shooting a slow lightning ball though. It was a tad goofy, and the lightning ball just really pissed me off. My second attempt, I went down to a lightning strike attack where the boss launched multiple lightning bolts into the air, which caused AoEs on the ground. It was fair, I was just getting cocky that run. Beyond that though, there's nothing else to really talk about. His moveset really was just be an aggressive electric chimera. I wanted a few more room-wide attacks to really bring things together in the latter half of the fight, but the boss ended up going down quicker than I expected between EO and I. I really love the design, I love what the boss brings, and I think the arena is incredibly cool. That dark abyssal background really works with the pops of purple the boss's attacks bring, and it was a great fight to end my time with the game. It just doesn't go the extra mile. While the Ice DLC boss was doing a bit too much with her moveset, Lord of Thunder did a little bit too little. I wonder if the Fire DLC boss can find a middle ground. At number 6, we have the Gilded Hunter, fought at the end of the Ashen Depths. A rather infamous boss in Code Vein, this fight decides to play around with the concept of survival as a mechanic. What do I mean by this? Well, the first half of the fight involves you learning the Gilded Hunter's moveset. He's got the usual spin to win move, he's got a leaping slam that leaves an AoE blast on impact, he has a forward thrust that shoots out a large red beam, which has a pretty tricky hitbox to avoid, and he has a blood AoE that he can summon around himself after a short charging period. Combining all these attacks with regular melee combos makes the Gilded Hunter a fairly aggressive boss. All while you get a weirdly Xenoblade 3 style music track in the background, let's go. The true difficulty of this fight lies when the boss enrages, and I mean it when I say he enrages, more than any other time I've used that term. His stats all gain a massive boost for roughly 35 seconds, and your goal is to simply survive. All of his attacks become deadlier, more AoEs, an extra lunge blast, faster animations, it's the whole ciabatta. The challenge here is that you're not supposed to actually fight the boss in this state, you're just stalling for time until his buffs run out, as he'll then fall to the floor for a large period of time, and from there you have to DPS race your way to victory by unleashing all your strongest moves. Succeed and the boss goes down. Fail and the boss rebuffs himself, putting you back in the whirlwind of pain. Knowing the gimmick and also recognizing that the best way to dodge attacks is to do the Bloodborne strategy of dodging inwards made this fight really manageable for me. It allowed me to have a lot of fun in the process, unlike the fanbase of Code Vein when the game launched, as this was considered one of the hardest and most annoying fights in the game. I can see why, I just don't share that sentiment in the slightest. At number 5, we have the Queen's Knight, fought in the Memories of the Player. If you haven't played Code Vein, you play as a revenant with amnesia, you have a role to play in the story, but it's not until you go back to the Memories of the Player, which in my case were the Memories of Billy S., to discover the truth. First though, you have to take down the Queen's Knight. While I think the rematch in the late game is a badly placed, badly paced affair, the original battle here in our memories is one of the most exciting moments in the game. You fought through a war zone, and all that's standing between you and the truth is this demonic creature. His attacks are reminiscent of the enemies you fought up to this point, especially those from the Cathedral of Sacred Blood, which gave me a nice leg up from the start. There's the spin to win that every boss can do, which just involves me dodging out of the way to avoid. He's got a shield slam, which is often followed up by a melee combo, which can be dodged around with relative ease. He has a fairly quick thrust attack, which punishes players trying to dodge backwards, or who aren't strafing around the boss to avoid blows. And he has an extremely powerful lunge that can propel him across the arena to catch up with you. You don't want to be healing during this because he will punish you severely. But I did find that dodging through many of his combos gave me enough time to get off my healing animation before he could punish further. When the Queen's Knight enrages, all of his attacks get stronger, and he gains a few new abilities, the main one being his ability to teleport. He starts off with a jump attack, where he'll teleport above you to deliver a wide slam, the same move used by the axe-wielding knights in the cathedral. You should know how to avoid this. This move then upgrades again mid-fight, where after the first slam, he'll teleport away and slam down somewhere else in the arena, creating a plus sign of AoE lines that you have to avoid standing in. Not a difficult move and fairly fun to punish, plus pretty cinematic if I do say so myself. And that's really the fight. It's not overly difficult, but it provides a perfect challenge for its place in the game, and is followed by one of the most hype cutscenes and the realization of who your character is in the wider lore. And that ends with you unlocking your true blood code and your character's canonical class, which is just iconic. I'll talk about it more in the area ranking. At number 4, we have the Skull King, the penultimate boss of the game, found within the jail of Stagnant Blood. Firstly, I have to say I love the design of this boss. Some would say the wolf face looks a bit goofy, and 55 pack of abs he's rocking is a bit too much, and I would agree, but also if that man rocked up ready to beat me up with his sword, I would be intimidated. His battle is similar to the Queen's Knight and Juzo Mido, being a completely straightforward duel to the death, his swords versus your blade. For the most part, you can rely on your instincts to avoid many of his attacks, but damage can be fatal, especially in the back half of the fight where every melee combo is accented with trails of damaging blood that are very easy to back into if you're not careful. Basically, the Skull King is Lady Maria, but for furries. One thing I love is how, because he's a recently turned Revenant, he still has access to his Blood Veil abilities, and of course he uses the Hound class. For the player, these are armor sets with unique parry animations depending on their type. For Skull King, the Hounds just add more range to his moveset, even allowing him to do a massive dash forwards across the arena to make up distance. Anytime he transitions between his enraged states, he'll create an AoE blast, which means you can't just pile damage on him as he powers up. Instead, you need to figure out the best times to trigger his stagger animation, and go to town then when the opportunity arises. His cross slash always caught me off guard, not because it's a hard move to dodge, but because my brain always thinks it's a safe move to punish when 90% of the time he'd just launch into another attack string and I'd get handed my ass. Then you combine this with many of his melee swings going all the way around his body, meaning I would roll to dodge the start of an attack, land behind him, and then get clipped by the very end of the swing instead. It's very Fume Knight from Dark Souls 2 coded. He has one last gasp in his final 10% health where the trails of his swings extend far across the arena, but given the strategy against the Skull King is to stay as close to him as humanely possible, it doesn't really affect things all that much. Overall, a much fairer fight than Juzo Mido, and a much tougher fight than the Queen's Knight. I love a duel, and I think Skull King manages to fit my vibe perfectly. At number 3, we have the Invading Executioner, fought in the Howling Pit. This can potentially be your second, third, or fourth boss of the game, depending on how you progress through the early areas, but for me, she was definitely the toughest of that potential trio. Not so much for the first part of the fight, where again you're just learning the boss's moveset and waiting for that enraged state to hit. She has a pole slam that she does when you're in close range, which is mega punishable. She has a few long pole swings that you can dodge with the right timing, although one of them is a brutal combo that ends in a super delayed swing that does mega damage if it hits. She can summon water geysers to blast you from below, and all of her attacks inflict the slow debuff on the player. If you don't have a way to cure slow, this fight is going to be rough, as it makes your character's movement speed feel like you're running through caramel. It's awful. This forces you to really learn Discount Hatsune Miku's moveset, as you can't afford to take damage, especially after she starts pole dancing and flinging water everywhere, a move that she sometimes breaks out during the second half of the fight. Now, all of her combos contain a sequence of her pole dancing and spinning around the pole in circular patterns, which you also have to dodge outwards or inwards to avoid, and you have to stay close to her, because if you make too much distance, she will kill you. Because she has a lunge dash attack where she rides her pole across the water that is way too damaging for this point in the game. It will one-shot you, and if by some miracle you survive, she'll likely just slide right back in your direction to two-shot you instead. This dash is the reason I was stuck on this fight for almost 2 hours. I just couldn't predict it for a majority of my attempts until I realized that this was all about spacing and baiting her to use it. Once that clicked, the Invading Executioner became a lot easier, and I found myself really enjoying the fight. I went through all the stages of grief with the difficulty until we wrapped back around to acceptance, and ultimately she became one of my favorite fights. We didn't need the slowness build-up, but we also didn't need the poison build-up on the Butterfly of Delirium, so maybe the developers are just evil incarnate, who knows. At number 2, we have the Successor of the Breath, found in the Ridge of Frozen Souls. Of all the successors, this is the fight that hits the hardest, both for the story and for the fun moveset we get to face. One of our companions, Mia, has just found out that her brother Nicola volunteered to be a successor. She thought he was dead, but it turns out he's alive and on the verge of frenzy. And did I mention he's a child? It's up to us to take him down in battle so we can calm his relic and quell his anger, and his fight is really cool. He's a giant yeti suit of armor, and if there's a trope I love, it is a living suit of armor. He's got a few moves in phase 1, but nothing too crazy. The usual spin to win is there, I'm really getting tired of saying that. He has a shield charge to make up distance, and both the charge and the spin to win can be weaved into his various melee combos, so you have to be prepared for either or to show up mid-fight. Most deadly though is his icicle attack. He'll bury his head in the snow and launch a series of icicles forwards towards the player. They do massive damage, but are also fairly telegraphed. Unless he decides to do a variant of the attack where after burying his head in the snow, he then moves to the side to shoot the icicles in a different direction. This attack is so rare, but caught me almost every time. You just need to learn the dodge timing of when the icicles come out with this move and you'll be fine, but in phase 2, when everything gets more explosive, that can be tough. Speaking of, when Mr. Breath enrages, the boosters on his suit activate, which is really cute actually. Nicola is a big fan of space, even as a rocket-themed backpack, so of course his successor form would incorporate this. You have to watch out for his various new attacks, such as his ability to dash across the arena at light speed, or his various air propulsion blasts where the boss will float up and then deal damage upon crashing down. Once you understand the timings, these attacks aren't that threatening at all, so in that case he'll just do a 4-punch combo and knock your ass flat. Overall, once you get the moveset, it's very easy to AI loop him into his melee attacks, which is a tiny bit of a shame, but that doesn't take away from the fact that his moveset is pretty fun, and that the story of this fight made me enjoy it so much more. I'd say this battle against Nicola was my before and after for Code Vein. Once I beat him, I was locked in for the rest of the story and I truly understood the combat. So thank you, Mr. Breath. You're my favorite base game boss. At number 1, we have the Hellfire Knight, the first of the 3 DLC bosses, and I'll give you one guess as to what his element is. That's right, it's ice! No, it's fire, come on guys, it's in the name. I think it's kind of unhinged for Code Vein to throw the Hellfire Knight at the players as the first DLC boss, because it is infinitely more tanky and more powerful than either of the other 2 DLC fights. They might have made more arena-wide mechanics or wide-reaching attacks, but Hellfire Knight is brutal for his extreme aggression and ability to punish a majority of your combos. Many of his melee attacks come out extremely fast, and there are barely any moves that can be traditionally punished. You really have to make your own luck here. The attack that got me the most often was his tail swipe, where he winds up for a surprisingly long time, before spinning around and knocking me back. I just couldn't time it consistently. But for a Hellfire Knight, it's not actually until you piss him off that he actually starts using his element. But I'd argue his enhanced moveset is actually easier to deal with overall. He has a few simple combos, but his big wide-reaching melee fire attack is actually incredibly easy to avoid, as the first 2 big swings come out pretty fast, but the final portion of the combo has a really long wind-up you can avoid by standing behind the boss. And of course he's got elemental attacks too. He can summon fire pillars beneath you that expand outwards Libra style, and he's got a fire tornado that he can lock onto an opponent and it will follow them along the ground. I can't imagine dealing with this attack in solo, so thank god it almost always locked onto EO. The thing with Hellfire Knight is that his moveset doesn't evolve any further in the fight, it's just that he has an insanely high health pool, so you're forced to deal with it for an extended period of time, which makes making mistakes a very viable issue. And yet the moveset is fun, frenetic, fast-paced, fantastic. It reminds me of when I first fought Manus in the Dark Souls DLC, and how it felt like that fight was too fast for the game until you got used to it. Same thing happens here. Hellfire Knight is so fast and punishing, but I can see how fun it could be once I'm on the same level. Dare I say, it's one of the few fights I really want to try again, and solo. Congrats Code Vein DLC, you kind of suck, but you've got some good boss fights. And that's my list. Code Vein has been completed. I have an area ranking in the works, and I would love to cover Code Vein too, so if this video reaches 500 likes, I will do just that. I want to give a massive shout out to my YouTube channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing, thank you so much. It's $4.99, you get access to a Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 Let's Play, and you get shout outs in the description and at the end of videos as well. Okay, if you guys want to follow me, I have multiple social medias, but I also stream every week here on YouTube. So I might be streaming right now. You don't know. You should go check. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Adios.